Good afternoon. This is the first in an occasional series of Twitter Lives that I've decided to do about Brexit and business. And I've timed this first one to coincide with Brexit at National Action Weekend and the launch of a campaign by the Liberal Democrats, which, full disclosure, I'm a member of, which is titled 365 Days to Stop Brexit campaign. And originally, when I conceived the idea of doing these Twitter Lives, I was going to discuss a conference that I attended last week, which was organised by the Liberal Democrat Party, and we were very privileged to have a number of senior UK business leaders talk to us about what they saw as the challenges and pitfalls of Brexit and why they were so concerned about it. So I was going to talk about that for my first Twitter Live, but of course events happen, and we've had a whole series of disclosures, really going back to the Channel 4 documentary series week before last, and then we've had a whole series of disclosures in The Guardian in particular, the testimony at the Select Committee earlier this week, where we had Chris Whillier giving evidence, and then we had a special debate in Parliament as well, organised by Tom Brake, the Lib Dem spokesperson on Brexit. So there's been a lot going on in the past week around the Brexit story, and so I thought I would start with this, because I found it really quite overwhelming and quite hard to get my head around some of this stuff, and I've done some digging and done some research about it. I wasn't entirely unfamiliar with Cambridge Analytica, so I have been following this story for a while as it relates to their involvement in the US election as well as the EU referendum. So I thought I would start off by really kind of exploring that story a little bit and what it means for where we are right now, and then follow that up with a series of further discussions about Brexit and business. So before I get into this, just a very, very quick introduction about myself. My name is Denyse Whillier. I was a chief executive for 8 years, and I have 25 years experience in running businesses and in very senior management and leadership positions, including in the private sector. I did a business management training at Cranfield School of Management, which is one of our top schools here in the UK. I work now as a business consultant, so I have my own business, and I work with small SME companies and also consult on leadership as well. So my particular interest in Brexit is really about what does it mean for the economy, what does it mean for industry, what does it mean for SME businesses, what does it mean for jobs, and what does it mean for funding of our public services. And one of the things that I'm particularly interested in is what it means for skills and for the businesses that I work with and have in my network and circle of friendships, who are all saying that they are really, really struggling to get the talent that they need. So that's my particular, where I'm coming from when I'm thinking particularly about Brexit. And so, again, full disclosure, these broadcasts are part of my efforts to support the Best for Britain movement. They have no idea that I'm doing this. So this, when I kind of link this to Twitter, this will be the first that they know about it. Like I say, it's also part of me supporting the Liberal Democrat campaign, 365 Days to Stop Brexit. So that's a little bit about me, and just a word for any trolls tuning in. I don't bother to engage with trolls, and I just block them straight away. I just can't be, I really can't bother, I haven't got time for it. So where do we find ourselves right now? So I wanted to really put some context to some of the stories that we've had in the news over the past few days. So we've had some pretty astonishing claims emerging that the Leave campaigns worked together and overspent during the European referendum. And there's a question mark that if that's true, that could be illegal. And there's been a whole bunch of documents released by a new campaign group that has been set up called Fair Vote Now. And that's alongside evidence that the whistleblower Shamir Sani gave, which suggested that Vote Leave, which was the official campaign, and Be Leave, which was a youth targeting group, which was run by these two young graduates working very closely together during the referendum, despite rules from our electoral commission, which forbids that sort of organisation. And then the other thing to sort of throw into the mix was that Vote Leave, which was one of the other parties to the that were campaigning, they made a direct payment on behalf of this Believe group of £625,000, and that was to a voter targeting company called Accredited. And this Accredited is a Canadian company, which I don't know about now, but certainly if you looked up until very recently on the internet for it, you would have struggled to find it. And the intellectual property for this Accredited company is owned by somebody called Robert Mercer. So I'm going to start the story with who is this Robert Mercer character. Because he's a kind of one of the key protagonists in all of this. So there's a fair amount out there on the internet, some really good sources of stories. News piece very recently in Bloomberg. There's a very good piece in Forbes magazine. So he's basically a far-right American Trump supporter who owns Cambridge Analytica. Now I'm going to put a pin in that because Cambridge Analytica, I'm going to talk about in a moment, is a bit more complicated than just than what it seems. But you've probably heard that Cambridge Analytica's vice president was, up until not so long ago, Steve Bannon. That very same Steve Bannon who was the chief strategist for Donald Trump and who is under investigation by Robert Mueller for his involvement in the whole Trump-Russia collusion case. So, so that's Robert Mercer, and this Cambridge Analytica is a little bit complicated because it's actually part of a network of interlinked and intertwined companies. And you can actually find them on our Companies House website, and you'll see, if you do go and check them out, that there's a common denominator through most of these companies, which is this chap called Alexander Nix, and he's the bloke that turned up in that Channel 4 documentary where they did the whole kind of expose behind the scenes of the seedy world of Cambridge Analytica. So he is director on a number of companies. I've forgotten the exact number now, but he's a director of a number of these companies, including Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica here in the UK, I can't speak for the US, but here in the UK, Cambridge Analytica is actually listed as a dormant company, and the only director of that company is Alexander Nix. So I'm guessing that when the company made an announcement that the board of directors was suspending Alexander Nix in the light of all of those Channel 4 revelations, it was actually in that instance Alexander Nix suspending himself. So that's just my supposition. Now, Cambridge Analytica is actually one of a whole host of companies, like I say, and it's one of what is known as the SCL group of companies. And this SCL is short for Strategic Communication Laboratories, and its roots are as a private British behavioural research and strategic communications company. And like I say, it's in this kind of quite complicated network of companies that kind of open and close, that are dormant, that are active, that are linked with Cambridge Analytica. And this SCL group describes itself as a global election management agency, and the London-based sort of outlet of that was founded way back in 1993 by somebody called Nigel Oakes, and he is an old Etonian who has a background in advertising and behaviour analytics, and he serves as its CEO. And this SCL company expanded into sort of military and political arenas. It became known for alleged involvement in military disinformation campaigns, to social media branding, to voter targeting. And according to its website, it's participated in over 25 international political and electoral campaigns since 1994, and these were primarily in the developing world. And so they sound like a pretty charming bunch, as you will no doubt have realised if you've had the opportunity to watch the Channel 4 documentaries. If you haven't done already, then I really strongly recommend that you do. They're up on the Channel 4 News channel on YouTube, so very easy to find. But they basically mounted kind of psych ops operations to use misinformation to run rumour campaigns, set up false flags, and effectively send people in the direction that they wanted, in order to advance the kind of the cause of the people that were paying them. And not in that sense, I'm not telling you anything new. That's exactly what Alexander Nix and his sidekick told Channel 4. And again, according to their website, they reckon that they've influenced elections in Italy, Latvia, Ukraine, Albania, Romania, South Africa, Nigeria. Nigeria's had a lot of press in The Guardian recently around this. Kenya, Mauritius, India, Indonesia, Thailand, Taiwan, Colombia, Antigua, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, some kits. There's been quite a bit of news around some kits as well, which you'll be able to easily find in The Guardian, and Trinidad and Tobago. And SCL formed Cambridge Analytica in order to participate in the election process in the United States. It's obviously a massive market. They spend millions and millions of pounds at both state and federal level in their elections. There's lots of money to be made there by the company, but it's also now linked to a political project, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So they entered the US market back in 2012. They've been involved in some 44 US congressional, US Senate and state level elections in the 2014 midterms, as well as the Republican Party presidential primaries. And then they came very much to our consciousness in 2016, first because they were part of the campaign that supported Ted Cruz, and then subsequently running the sort of data analytics side of things for the Trump campaign. So this Cambridge Analytica is now heavily funded by the hedge fund billionaire Robert Mercer, who also owns its intellectual property. And a bit complicated this because it looks like he's kind of pulled out of Cambridge Analytica and he's got his daughters in there running it. And like I said earlier, he is an uber purist right-winger. And part of his aim, and that of his daughter Rebecca in particular, is to bring down the Republican Party, because they basically think that it's the Washingtons, that it's all the swamp, drain the swamp, all of that stuff. And he's also against what he sees as a socialist Europe. And Mercer is also invested in Breitbart, and that's how he met his political soulmate, Steve Bannon. Now, Steve Bannon has his own political project, and apparently Britain has always been key to Bannon's plans. It was a kind of crucial part of his strategy for changing the entire world order. I have to say, I cannot believe that I'm saying any of this. It's just not something that I've ever conceived as a possibility. But there we have it. Bannon set up Breitbart UK in order to support UKIP ahead of the 2015 general election. And I found a quote which I thought kind of summed it up. I can't remember now exactly what the reference for that quote was, but I really only use very, very good, credible news sources. So it said, he, i.e. Bannon, believes that to change the world, you have to first change the culture. And Britain was key to that. He thought that where Britain led, America would follow. The idea of Brexit was hugely symbolically important to him. So my reading, and I think that of other people looking at this, is that Cambridge Analytica's role in the UK referendum on the European Union was effectively a testing ground for the US election, a sort of a petri dish, if you like. It was a pilot run. And I was reading somewhere that Bannon and his sort of acolytes think that we are, it's all down to Abbey here in the UK, and that that's kind of exactly that's exactly who we are. And like I say, that if Brexit could happen in the UK, then there was a reasonable possibility that somebody like Trump could get elected in the US. So let's just talk a little bit about the link to the Leave campaign. So the Leave, I get really confused with this, but the Leave EU part of it is the UKIP arm of it. Now, Nigel Farage and Steve Bannon have been close associates since at least 2012, if not before. The 2012 was the earliest reference that I found. That's not to say that they did or didn't know each other before then. Like I said, Bannon opened the London arm of his news website, his propaganda machine, effectively, Breitbart, in 2014, and that was to support UKIP in what he described in a comment to the New York Times as being the latest front in our current cultural and political war. And those relationships continued. As we know, Farage popped up at Trump Tower after the election. We all wondered what he was doing there. And apparently the purpose of that was to meet with Bannon to discuss US-UK politics. And then off the back of that meeting, he was then able to meet with Trump. And we then had that sort of iconic shot in the gold gilded lift. And in December, Jacob Rees-Mogg met with Bannon for an hour in the UK in London to discuss US-UK politics as well. So we now know that Rees-Mogg has a relationship to Bannon and has been discussing US-UK politics. And more recently, there was a conference reported in Europe, that was probably a couple of weeks ago now, where Bannon, Farage and his far-right buddies were all at as well. Can't remember if Le Pen was there. My memory is that she was, but I wouldn't want to say that for absolute fact. So yeah, so Rees-Mogg has also got a relationship there with Bannon. So just going to go back to the Mercers and Cambridge Analytica for a moment. So Robert Mercer has 3 daughters, and Rebecca is the one that we hear quite a lot about, because she's kind of she was on the transition team, so that's one of the reasons that we hear a lot about her. But she and her sister Jennifer are involved with a newly created company in the UK called Emerdata, and we don't actually really know what the purpose of this company Emerdata is. But if we look at the records on Companies House, we can see that Alexander Nix opened the company. It didn't do anything from a company's perspective for a few months. He was the director, and I can't remember if Wheatfield, who's another player in all of this, was the director or not. You kind of lose the plot with all of this. But anyway, he was the director. There were just 2 shares to begin with, and then there was a new filing at Companies House, which you can find for yourself, where there was obviously money invested in this company because there was over £1.5 million worth of shares in the company, reported to Companies House, and that's where we saw that the 2 Mercer daughters, Rebecca and Jennifer, were appointed as directors of Emerdata, and that was actually on the 16th of March. So that was before all of this news broke here in the UK around in Channel Cambridge Analytica and the Channel 4 reporting, and then that whole series of articles that we've had in The Guardian. So they are 2 of the directors of Emerdata, along with Alexander Nix, and another of the people on the board is the business partner of Eric Prince. Eric Prince, if you've been following the shenanigans over in America, donated to the Make America #1 PAC, which is a Mercer-funded group that supported Donald Trump's presidential campaign. He's the brother of that education secretary, Betsy DeVos, and well, all I would say is if you look him up, he is pretty edifying. It's pretty edifying to read about him and his kind of business associates and kind of what they're up to. And then the other thing that has been around in the news as well is talk of a new far-right party here in the UK to be modelled on the Italian Five-Star Movement, and that Aaron Banks, who you will remember was the financial backer for the Leave for UKIP, and very much involved with the Leave campaign, and Nigel Farage are involved in. So that's something for us to stick a pin in and watch to see how that all unfolds. So that's a bit of a rundown of kind of who's who in the background to all of this, and just to sort of try and make a little bit more sense of this whole Cambridge Analytica story that there's been out there. So this past week we had that very compelling testimony by Chris Whillier to one of our select committees that deals with kind of all the digital media stuff here in the UK, and I'm going to put the link up to that because there's some information that Chris Whillier has shared with that committee is all there publicly available for us to see. And really off the back of that testimony, which was some 4 hours long, it led to a whole lot of questions about whether our electoral rules were broken here in the UK, and if so, who knew about this, and when did they know about it. So really this question of has there been cheating has been very much around in the last few days in the press, and that obviously goes to the heart of the integrity of the Leave campaign. And we already know that the Leave campaign told a bunch of lies, not least that one about funding for the NHS, which was a key reason why a number of people voted Leave in the referendum. So there are complaints being dealt with by the Electoral Commission. We had that raid on the Cambridge Analytica headquarters by the Information Commissioner, who sought a warrant to be able to seize control of their servers. So there's investigations going on through that route. There's been complaints made to the Metropolitan Police. We've got the Common Select Committee looking into these matters. We had that special debate in the Commons earlier in the week that was brought about by Tom Brake, the Brexit spokesperson for the Lib Dems. So we've got all of those kind of complaints working their way through the system. We've got some of our top barristers in the UK on the case who think that there is a very compelling case around this. So we'll see where all of that goes. But meanwhile, the Brexit juggernaut continues, and so you know, we need to really be paying attention to that. And if we, like me, want to see the United Kingdom stay in the UK, there really is to be thinking about what is it that we can be doing to support those organisations campaigning for us to remain. The other thing I just want to flag up, which was breaking news today, is that an ethics complaint has been filed over in the US for elections violations. So this is all to do with Cambridge Analytica, and it's a file that is a complaint, that's been filed against Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, against the Cambridge Analytica campaign, and ties in John Bolton's super PAC. And John Bolton, if you remember, is the guy that's got everybody freaked out as being the national security replacement for H.R. McMaster. I'm not going to go down the John Bolton route because that's a whole other wormhole. But just suffice to say that a legal complaint has been filed for elections violations, and that was just breaking news today, so we'll see what happens with that. So here in the UK, we've got the EU withdrawal bill, and it's had its first and second stage hearings. It's just, that's in the House of Lords. It's just gone through the committee stage at the House of Lords, and we now have 9 senior Conservatives, which include Chris Patten, who was the former Conservative Party chairman, and Douglas Hogg, who is a former agricultural minister, all supporting a series of very substantial changes to the EU withdrawal bill. And so one of those is about giving Parliament a vote on staying in the customs union, which it looks like it's certain to pass, but you know, we learnt from the EU referendum that we can't be complacent about anything. And what that amendment means is that MPs will get a say on this particularly contentious issue, even though the government has been doing its absolute best to kick this particular issue into the long grass. It's been doing its best to kick a lot of issues to do with Brexit into the long grass, to be fair about it. We've also got another significant proposal on giving a Parliament a voice on what happens in the event that the government's final Brexit deal is voted down. So that's again, I certainly found this complicated. I don't know about you, but there's been an argument been made is that if the Brexit deal is voted down, then we will end up with no deal at all. So there's a proposal on the table to deal with that. Obviously, the question of the Irish border is really, really important, and so Peter Hain has tabled a amendment around that. He's the Labour peer. And then we've got the Labour Party itself tabling amendments to the withdrawal bill, which are also aimed at preventing the UK from crashing out of Europe without a deal if Parliament rejects the outcome of the Brexit talks. So a whole lot of things happening on the front of the with respect to the EU withdrawal bill. So at this point, there's kind of one key action that we can take, which is to contact our own MPs and to demand a vote on this. And so there's a web page that I'm going to put up attached to this for you, which is from Best for Britain, which gives you a very, very handy link to send an email directly to your MP requesting that you have a vote on what happens. So that's an immediate action that you can take to put pressure on your MP. There is an argument made about, well, you know, my MP is such a leaver, such a supporter of leave. What's the purpose in my contacting him at all? My own MP is Tim Mountain, who, you know, I'm quite sure I'm not going to be changing his mind anytime soon. But the point is that if we are concerned about this Brexit juggernaut, then we all have to do our little bits to put a stop in it. And so I'm going to be sending that MP, that particular email to my MP as well, and following up with some further actions as well, even though I know that there is not a cat in hell's chance of me changing his mind. So that actually, that kind of fact that I'm not, you know, I really don't think I'm going to have any influence on my own MPs' actions and decisions is part of the impetus for me thinking, well, what else can I do that's going to be meaningful? So hence these broadcasts. So I'm going to wind up the broadcast now because it's been quite a long one and we've gone through quite a lot of stuff. So I want to leave you with a fact that was sort of very much around in the Twitterverse yesterday, which is that we have gone from being the fastest growing economy in the G7 before the Brexit vote to now being the slowest growing economy. So to say that again, we have gone from being the fastest growing economy in the G7 before the Brexit vote to being the slowest growing economy. And that is a real cause for concern. Not going to get into that now, that's for another day. So just going to wind up by saying that I'm going to be back with further broadcasts on an as and when basis about what Brexit means for business. I'm going to be posting a recording of this over on my YouTube channel, so that's in my name, Denyse Whillier, and any relevant links for articles and documentation that I think is helpful for making sense of this, and definitely the link for the Best for Britain campaign that I just mentioned as well. That will go up tomorrow, Sunday. Not tomorrow, Saturday, the day after Sunday, more likely. So yeah, I'm going to wind up now, and just to say thank you so much for tuning in and listening, and to wish you a very happy Easter, whatever it is that you are doing. So thank you so much for tuning in.